Hello and welcome to another edition of Santos on Sports alongside my partner in crime here, Chris Santos. I am Paul Santos. Wow, there's a lot going on in the world of sports, that's for sure. And we're going to talk all about it with you at 774-762-6234. First thing we'd like to do is thank our sponsor, Scotty's Pub, located at 202 Pleasant Street in Fall River. Citywide Glass, 3 locations to serve you at 425 State Road in Dartmouth, additional locations in Fall River and Taunton. Lakeville Athletic Club, 325 Bedford Street in Lakeville, and John Seed, attorney at law, 156 8th Street in the city of New Bedford. Chris, are you able to keep up with all this stuff?
Well, I'm trying to do my best, Paul, but our first topic is going to be some litigation, which is right up your alley. So
Yes.
I might have to adjust myself to the terms of Paul Santos in the legal part of this situation. But a lot with that, with Jack Jones, and then obviously leading up to what's going on with the NBA and a lot of drafts before going on with trades prior to tonight's draft. Very, very interesting. Celtics get involved, picked up Porzingis, dropped Marcus Smart, and a couple other teams making some other moves, and that might implicate some things that may go on in tonight's draft, 8 o'clock. So check that out. Celtics say they got more moves to make. So let's see what happens.
All right, well, let's start out with Jack Jones. Obviously, the arrest at the Boston Logan Airport, kind of a surprise situation where a bag going onto the x-ray machine results in the allegation that there were firearms in there, loaded magazines that were higher than what's allowed here in Massachusetts, so on and so forth. He's being arrested, $30,000 bail. A lot of people say, hey, you know what? You get a serious charge like that, you should be gone, right? Maybe I'll just cut him right now. Or B, you wait for the legal process to kind of play itself out. I don't know. Let's open it up to Chris Santos and see what he thinks on topic number 1.
Okay, so number 1, he pleaded guilty to 9 charges, which obviously 2 loaded guns on a carry-on.
Not guilty.
Excuse me, not guilty. I'm sorry. I apologize. Not guilty on the gun charges. 2 loaded guns on a carry-on bag, $30,000 cash bail, as you said. But, Paul, I'm kind of interested in the aspect of leading up to this. Let's talk about 2018 when he had some academic issues at USC. He got off the team after 2 seasons. That same kind of year, he had a house arrest because he burglarized a Panda Express. Then he transferred to Arizona State, was suspended in 2020 for violation of team rules. And then if you remember, last year, I believe he was suspended by Bill Belichick for the last 2 games of the season, and it was disclosed about what he did. So, his background is not anything to write home about, does not look pretty at all from where he's coming from. So that being said, you now add this big charge to it, which, again, Paul, you're going to tell me for the legal part, if, let's say, he was convicted on all 9 charges consecutively, that would be like 30 years if I'm not wrong, which doesn't really happen because judges don't usually do that. But if he gets 2 counts, it's possible he could get 2.5 years. And then he had another 2 counts, it could get like 18 months. So there is a lot to say with that. But for me, with what has gone on in the past and what he has had, I would be really surprised if the New England Patriots bring him back. I think they should let him go and move on and not wait this out. That's just my opinion.
Well, I think the fact that this isn't his first brush without following the rules is certainly a factor. You know, if he had a totally clean record, and I don't mean criminal record, I mean just as far as following school rules, following Patriot rules, following the college rules, all of the above, that would be something else. But for all of those things to add up, and now this, you kind of got to say, well, hey, maybe it's time to cut ties. Certainly, Patriots can do whatever they want. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to wait for the criminal process to play out. An employer can make the decision, hey, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. We're letting you go. Of course, they'd have to look at the terms of the contract, whatever the contract they have with the Patriots. I don't think any of that's guaranteed in the way they do it most of the time. So generally speaking, in a situation like that, an employer can let someone go. So now the question is, should they, right? Well, that's a decision that the Patriots have to make. I do say, and I've been both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, as you know, I generally like to see the criminal process play itself out. That whole thing about presumption of innocence, that should mean something. You're supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So a lot of people will go, oh, yeah. Well, but yeah, that should mean something, because any one of us could be falsely accused of something, and we wouldn't want anybody to just say, well, he's guilty, just, don't annoy me with the facts. Okay, this particular case, it sounds like, they got some pretty good facts. The allegation seems to be that, he walks into the airport, he has the bag has his name on it, he puts it on the conveyor belt, and lo and behold, there are firearms in there that are loaded. Pretty horrific, right? So now I'm thinking to myself, here's an argument that sometimes attorneys make. They'll make this argument, and then at first it sounds like a BS argument, but then when you think of it, you might say, well, it certainly has some possibility to it, and that is, would somebody be that stupid to take a loaded firearm, put it in a bag, walk to Logan Airport and put it on the conveyor belt and try to put it through, right? So the answer is, well, yeah, there are people that do dumb things like that, right? On the other hand, maybe there is some kind of an argument. I'm not saying this is the argument at all, and I'm not saying anybody should buy the argument. Maybe there is some kind of an argument where, he travels all the time and he's got one bag to go to practice and another one to go to the OTAs and another one is for, private suitcase and another one something else, and he's in a hurry and he grabs the wrong bag and didn't have the intent to go to the airport with the weapons in there. Now, you're going to say, well, whether he did or he didn't, he was sloppy and he still did it. Well, there's a such thing as criminal intent. So if you could really show that, he grabbed the wrong bag and he really had no intention of doing this, that's a mitigating factor that could be weighed another time. Now, I can hear it already. I can hear people going, cut it out. Listen to this guy, Mr. Defense Attorney. Are you really going to buy that nonsense? I mean, come on now. Well, yeah, except that how could anybody not think that X-ray machine is not going to pick that up? I mean, I can't. I mean, all of us, we go through and make sure that we don't have a little, the wrong size right guard, or the right size. You want to bring hairspray or something like that. You can't fit it in there, and it has to be a certain size, and the liquid can't be so much, and we're going through there and all that. And here's this guy bringing in like firearms, loaded firearms, that would have theoretically gone on the plane, right? So maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I don't like the fact that this isn't his first, brush with not following regulations. So I don't know. It's a distraction. He's a good player. It's not like somebody's been assaulted or it's not a domestic violence thing or, something more horrific than that where you really, all the light bulbs go off and everything. So I don't know. I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I guess I would tend to say, let's see what other additional information comes out about it before we have a rush to judgment. I guess that would be my initial reaction to that. But what do you think out there? Should they cut him? Should they keep him? Is enough enough? What's the story with this guy, Jack Jones, 774-762-6234?
Well, let me ask you this, Paul. If he was not your best defensive player and not a starter, and he was just a backup and coming in or a special teamer or something different on this team, would he already be gone? So you got to look at it from that point of view too, plus what he makes, where he stands on your team. You had Gilmore, who was one of their best, and when he left, this guy came in, did a pretty good job so far with the Patriots since he's been playing. Supposedly has had a great OTAs and eyes opening for their coaching staff to say, hey, boy, he's really stepping it up now. And then this happens, which to me, I think he's your number one defensive back. So, there's a lot going to be involved. Allegations, allegedly did this, had no idea it happened. Again, you could let it play out with one of your best players on the defense and then make a decision, or just say, we're just not condoning this anymore. And we've seen this now from the Major League Sports that they're not wasting too much time. If something goes wrong right away, they're letting that person go. So kind of curious to see where the Patriots pull this one out.
Okay, let's go to our phone lines here. It's Butch, who I believe is in Acushnet. You're on Santos Sports.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi, how are you?
Good afternoon.
What's going on?
Not too much.
Jack
So,
Jones.
at the very least, this man was extremely careless, correct?
I would say yes.
I would think so.
Probably put some of the public at risk.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Agree.
With all the recent or ongoing issues with gun control and the violence and school shootings and mass shootings and all that different type stuff, and this guy takes loaded handgun to the airport. Now, first thing I would do is I would test him for drugs. There's more to this. I believe there's more to this. He could have been high. He could have been on some type of, banned substance to where his mind was altered, because I just can't get over the fact that he was extremely careless. And is this the type of person that a business owner wants working for him and him or her in their business? Unfortunately, athletes aren't treated like that. Athletes are treated differently based on how many wins they could bring, regardless of their character. Now, I'm not saying he has a bad character, but he certainly has some issues with carelessness, and I just don't believe that someone that has, does what he does, couldn't have been on some type of altering mind substance to bring a bag with a loaded handgun. That's extremely careless. In fact, that's against the law, to the way that he carried it and the way that he was careless and left it subject to unsecure. So I don't know. Sports is different, and if this was, if this was your law firm, Paul, or a teacher in Chris's school, and they did that, would they be fired or let go? Probably, and probably should. The fact that he's an NFL star, he'll get different treatment. In fact, if you look at the NBA now, they're even saying Morant, his 25-game suspension was too harsh, even though, with everything going on with firearms and that type of lifestyle and how dangerous things are becoming with firearms, and they want to ban them. Hey, I don't think anything will happen to him. I think they'll keep him, but I think there's two standards, one for athletes and one for non-athletes.
All right, let's get Chris's response.
No, I have to agree with Butch and what he's saying on a regular person compared to a sports athlete. That gets a little bit different treatment. I clearly understand that. The intent of what he was trying to do is quite interesting, because obviously pleading not guilty, didn't realize that was in the bag, makes you think, as Butch said, could have been something else going on with this young man prior to going, to the airport to figure out what he actually brought and didn't. And, that really messed him up. So, that being said, it's Butch is what I'm thinking. The question is, are you letting him go, or are you keeping him and let it go through the judicial system? What would you do as a head coach?
If I was a head coach,
yeah.
I'm pretty straightforward. I would want, people who made better decisions and carried themselves a little bit differently, working for me. However, my tenure as a professional head coach depends on wins and losses. Mm-hmm. So, my ethical standards, I think, would change.
Right. Well, let me just say, just to talk about your point before about athletes being treated different than regular people. I think that because when you're talking about a private company, just like, such and such credit union or so-and-so's construction company, most of the time that person can be replaced pretty easily, and it doesn't really affect the bottom line of the company. Whereas if somebody, now this guy happens not to be a big star, but suppose it was like, Giannis or, big star in the league, somebody like that.
Like Jay Morant.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. The bigger the star, then whoever the owner is now looking at the bottom line about how much money they're going to lose. You know what I mean? So there's that. So there's that whole thing. Second thing is, what concerns me about this more so than, if he says, "Hey, I grabbed the wrong bag," which may be BS, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying I buy it or I don't, but let's say he grabbed the wrong bag. Well, then how come you still don't have a license, though, right? How come you have the wrong size magazine? Because if you're a law-abiding citizen and you have a gun, which you have every right to have, and like in Massachusetts, you have to be properly licensed, you have to be properly trained, you have to have a license to carry, you have to have training prior to before they give you the license. You have to make sure you don't have a criminal record. Let's say you did all that, and then you grabbed the wrong bag one day, right? You had no record, you grabbed the wrong bag. You might be willing to say, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe this guy's telling the truth. Maybe he did grab the wrong bag." But this guy wasn't following any of the rules. He had the wrong size magazine. He had had no FID card. He had no anything. So that's concerning.
Where he grabbed the wrong bag from, his gun locker? I mean, where was it? You know what I mean? Was it unsecure in his bedroom? Was it unsecure in his girlfriend's house? Where did he grab this wrong bag from, and where is this weapon typically stored where he could make such a mistake?
Judge Santos, can we strike juror number 1 from the?
You don't want that juror on your side.
But I was a prosecutor for a long time. I've done some criminal defense, but I have no sympathy for violence. I have no sympathy for criminal activity. I just, in general case, and maybe not this one, this is probably a bad example, but sometimes people get wrongly convicted, and you have to make sure that you can prove the thing beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case, it sounds like they got a very good case against them. So that's for,
very, very strong.
Very strong. That's for the court. But the question is, if you're Bill Belichick, first of all, if you were Bill Belichick, Butch, we might have a better chance of winning the division. but some of the decisions that poor Bill has made lately. But you would say, hey, you know what? I got to cut ties from this guy. That would be what you would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's a difficult position based on what they have and what they need, and what kind of pressure's on him to win, and what kind of contributions this guy's decided to give. But I'll tell you, it'd be very hard for me to not try to set a better example for the remaining people on the team that are doing the right things.
Right. Okay. And before you go, right, I got to tell you, we haven't talked about it yet. This whole Marcus Smart thing. When I heard that they got rid of Marcus Smart, I just leaped up in bed and I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God I don't have to watch this flopping, big-headed, egotistical son of a gun anymore. I can't stand this guy. He gives you a effort. I'll give him that. But I don't know. I'm just happy to see him go. I think you got to shuffle the deck a little bit. You don't want to let Tatum and Brown go. So, I mean, I think that was the right decision. What do you think?
So, certainly they need some change. I'm not sure if he was the right one. I'm not a big NBA guy. My son and Chris are, and by osmosis, I get a lot of comments, a lot of ideas, or a lot of opinions. But I do think that Marcus Smart needs to be thanked for the effort that he gives. And I thought that when he was out on the floor representing the Celtics, he gave nothing less than 100%. Now that doesn't mean that what he did panned out or, created wins all the time. In fact, on occasion, probably, was detrimental to the winning side. But he one thing he does need to get credit for is he was a competitor, and he did earn his money. And in this day and age, especially in the NBA, that's not always the case. One thing that I was talking to my son about, and I was hoping you guys covered it, was Porzingis is he's not a rental, but he only has 1 year left, correct?
My understanding is that the Celtics want to
player option, yeah.
Yeah, but the
player option.
The Celtics want to extend them, though.
Yeah. Now, is in the NBA they have 3 max salaries that each team can have? Is that how that works?
I believe so. I'd have to look that one up too, but I think that's right.
Yeah, I think there's 3 max salaries, and then so I'm not 1 year with Porzingis, and then he's gone potentially. So
well, I'm not throwing a max salary at Porzingis for a guy who's when he first came in, played 72 and like 66 games.
Yeah,
and then he went like 7 years where he averaged maybe 30 games where he's been injured a lot and everything else. So,
yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I think that he's prone to injury, which, Marcus Smart wasn't really prone to injury. So I don't know. I mean, we'll find out. Definitely needed some change. I think if they kept it the same, and they didn't and they weren't successful, if people would be looking at Brad Stevens going, you had an opportunity to make some changes and you didn't, and we just, this is like Groundhog Day, and well, that certainly has taken that approach away. This change is big for the Celtics, and we'll see.
Hey, Butch, I want to thank you for calling the radio station the other day. Was that you?
Yeah, that was a very good topic.
Yeah, and by the way, that was, who suggested that topic? Mr. Chris Santos. Yeah, he did. I was telling him, I said, I got to go on the radio in a couple of days, and I'm trying to figure out what to talk about, and he gave me that topic, and it did really well. But I have to tell Chris something here, and I want to hereby apologize to Butch for mistaking him for Mr. Guarantee. When he was on the line, I said, "Are you calling from Chicago?" And he goes, "No, that's the other guy."
I got to tell you, though, I was impressed with you. Detected a sense that you recognized the voice, and were very close. You were in the right sport in the right season.
Mm-hmm.
You did well enough to that was impressive.
All right, Butch. Thanks a lot for calling.
All right.
774-762-6234 if you want to get on the discussion. The first question is, should the Patriots dump Jack Jones in light of that arrest at the Boston Logan Airport, having guns in the duffel bag or whatever it was? And then the second question is, what about this Marcus Smart trade for Porzingis? Now, I got to tell you, Porzingis, I used to watch him when he was playing for Dallas. This last year, I didn't watch him that much. I thought he was really good. I thought he went well with Luka because you had that inside-outside game. So they got rid of him. I think there were a lot of games he wasn't that good. He seemed kind of clumsy out there. He got hurt a lot, as Butch just said. I think that's the number one thing I'd worry about is him getting hurt, not being able to stay on the floor. Because if you got another Time Lord, I mean, he could actually complement Time Lord really well. You get Time Lord out there, you take him out, you put Porzingis, and then you take him out, put Time Lord. You got a really big rim protector. You had somebody who you can, pass down for an alley-oop. Porzingis can shoot the outside shot as well, but he's got to be able to stay on the floor and Time Lord too. So I don't know. I like it, except for that one thing. Butch is right. Marcus Smart, as much as I found him to be annoying and everything, he's always out there. He gave you everything he had, and he was very, very rarely out of the lineup.
There's a difference, Paul, between being the superstar of your team and being the person who gets the ball all the time, as Porzingis was in his younger days, and took a lot of that heat and that pressure underneath and that banging on the inside, which have led to injuries and so forth. He may not have to do that in Boston if you have Tatum, you have Brown, and you have some of them other guys. He's just going to be that package in there to help. He doesn't have to be the leader, the point getter, the guy who's in charge, as he was, let's say, with the Knicks or with Dallas. And that's what they looked for, even in Washington. So it could help him out. And remember, too, he's now 27, which is more of that veteran that the Celtics would like to have. And you lose Gallinari, you lose Muscala. That's no big deal. And so you have that to help you, again, as you said, on the floor with Time Lord, if need be, and obviously replace him and take his spot when he's out and rest him as well, too. So I think that can really help Boston. On the opposite end, listen, nothing against Marcus Smart. I thought personally he was a great leader. He was your best defensive player. He won Defensive Player of the Year award. We've seen the hustle. We saw the green hair. We understand what kind of leadership that is. But Marcus Smart, in my eyes, always wanted to be that shooting guard, that guy who wanted the ball and take it from the outside instead of maybe being what the Celtics maybe wanted out of him, which is that point guard, to get more creative, to pass it more, to get Tatum, to get Brown, to get others involved. And then when you had that. So I thought there was always a difference when he came out of Oklahoma State that that's what he wanted, and maybe that's not what the Celtics wanted. Now, is he a Celtics leader? Yes, he was. Is he a Celtics great? No, I don't believe that he is. But that being said, I always thought he gave his heart and soul, and he said he played the best he could every time he was out on the floor. I don't deny that. I always thought he did too. I just didn't see the fit because what he wanted to be and what the Celtics wanted him to be just didn't seem to be the same. But wish him nothing but the best in Memphis, and hopefully that works out well for him. And I don't think the Celtics are done yet, Paul. I think they'll make some more moves and keep themselves with Brad Stevens very active with this draft and maybe a few more trades.
You know what I like about Smart, and all those things are true, what you said and what Butch said. So you do have to respect for the fact that he did give you everything he had. I mean, he never really took a night off. He was always out there.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I didn't like about him was a lot of times he didn't feel like a team player to me. You know, like he would sulk if he was on the bench. If he missed a shot and, you know, one of his teammates got the game-winning shot, he never seemed to look that happy about it. He was more unhappy that he missed the shot. You know, there would be times where the ball would be inbounded and he would be tangling up with somebody 25 feet away and then throw himself on the court to try to get a call, like the cheap call, you know, he throw himself down, you know. And in fact, that last game, I think it was one of the last games in the playoffs, he threw himself on the floor and the referee just looked at him like this, you know, and I thought to myself, good enough, you know. So I just didn't like all that. And I always thought that he had a big head. You know, he thought that he was better than he was. And he walked around like, you know, he thought he was better than the others. Okay, so, hey, a lot of the players are like that. I guess to be the alpha dog, you have to think you're the best. So I don't know what that's like. So maybe that's just what you have to do in order to excel at that level, to have that kind of mindset and so forth. But I always found it annoying. You know, and the other thing, too, is, you know, I always felt like there was another mouth to feed, you know. You had to got to keep Tatum happy. You know, he's the number one. Oh, Brown, you know, you got to keep him happy. You know, no, Smart, you got to keep him happy. Well, maybe Smart getting him out of the way kind of opens things up for Brown and Tatum. Maybe they can now put the team on their back and try to go to the next level. It would be interesting to see, though. I have to say, Porzingis is such a different player than Marcus Smart. So how does that all fit in? I mean, what's the starting lineup going to be? It's going to be Brown, Tatum, Porzingis, maybe Time Lord, or maybe Horford. Or maybe you put Brogdon in there if Brogdon is still there. I'm not sure they're going to be able to keep Brogdon now because Brogdon knows now that they were trying to dump him. So he's not going to be happy being there. But the starting lineup is going to be totally different with Porzingis around.
Yeah, and White is another name that
comes
Derek,
in. That's a guy I like.
Too.
There's a guy I like.
So he could get in there. But I think Boston right now, their main topic and their main goal in this draft, or maybe even by trade, is a point guard, a true point guard. That needs to be addressed. A guy that can handle the ball better than Jaylen Brown can.
It's not going to be Chris Paul.
Tatum can. And we're talking turnovers, which we know that those two guys can do, and we've seen it from them. But someone that you have confidence in to say, hey, this is my true point guard. I'm going to be able to score when I can, but my main job is assists. My main job is to get the ball and move it around. Keep the passing going, you know, make sure we don't have the turnovers, something that creates the energy on the offensive side of the ball. And Marcus did it on the defensive side of the ball. But I think they need something that really puts it all together, a true point guard. And I hope that comes out, whether it's going to be White or whether they deal Brogdon and maybe a pick and get someone out of that. So I'd like to see, hopefully, sooner than later, that comes true and they find themselves a good point guard.
All right, I got a couple of questions out there today for you. Smart gone. Is that good or bad? Dump Jack Jones of the Patriots after what happened at the airport with the guns. 774-762-6234. Give us a call here, Santos on Sports. We have a couple of comments over here. Missy Rocha Faria says, even if there was no criminal intent, it's negligence at best. Loaded weapons in a bag, eek. I mean, that's just too much to deal with. And Philip McDonald, he says, hey, look, you pick up the bag that probably has socks and T-shirts in it. You mean to tell me you can't feel the weight of the gun? Come on now, right? So a couple of comments there. I mean, I think most people are upset. I think most people don't buy whatever the defense you might be able to come up with. I just tossed a couple out there just to see what people thought. But it sounds like folks are thinking, hey, at best, There was a lot of sloppiness going on here. And as you said, it's not the first offense. That's the thing too. That's
it's not, Paul. But isn't it? I mean, you see if you know this, because I'm not sure on this. Doesn't the major sports, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, aren't there rules now that the players get spoken to? And let's say it comes from the commissioner or the NFL or the team, whether it's the team rules, whether it's the NFL rules, and they specifically come out and say, okay, fellas, bang, 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 bang. And they have a whole list of what is wrong and what you can't do. And would you think that would happen to register in your mind to say, hey, man, I'm a professional athlete. I got to follow these rules because, I'm something that the youth looks at. I'm something that society wants to see. And so you would think some of these guys, would respect what comes their way, whether it's a team rule or an NFL rule. So I find it kind of difficult not to know what you are doing and have no idea that you are carrying a bag like that. So that's very difficult for me when, when you set rules, whether it's team or the sport itself.
Right. I think most of the time, and I haven't read any contracts, that an NFL player would sign. And usually they're many, many pages long. They get into every kind of detail that you could possibly think of. But generally speaking, most contracts do have a code of conduct that, you're not going to get involved in criminal behavior and stuff like that. And by the way, most of the time when you have a contract, and this is the case in landlord-tenant law, if you sign a lease, let's say, and you say in the lease that you're not going to be involved in criminal conduct, let's say you're not going to have a gun, you're not going to have drugs, you're not going to, do this and do that, and you get charged with that, in the civil side of the law, in order to show that you should be able to get possession under the landlord-tenant case for landlord, you don't have to show a conviction at trial. You only have to show a violation of the lease. So a violation of the contract. Did you do this? Did you do that?
Yeah.
At a much lower standard, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. No, more likely than not, preponderance of the evidence. So the question is, did this conduct violate any term of his contract, separate and apart from the criminal offense, right?
Sure.
So I think most of the time they do have terms and conditions in there like that. But of course, it's up to the team, in this case, the employer, whether or not they want to go through with it or not, whether they, want to say, well, we're going to enforce that or not. It's totally up to them. I don't know. I haven't heard anything yet. I was thinking maybe after this happened that we get a kind of a quick decision on it. But
that's the other thing I was going to ask you. Now, how long would that take? So what you think now, this has been on for about a week?
About that, yeah.
Okay, so being a week gone by, wouldn't you think the Pats would make a move by that time? Or as a week has gone by, maybe we're going to let this, handle itself and see where it goes inside the court?
Right. Well, maybe too that because we're not in the regular season, there isn't a game next week. Yeah. We're talking about the OTAs. We're talking about, just doing the preliminary exercises and, kind of the preliminary practices and stuff like that. So there isn't a lot of pressure on them to do anything right now. I mean, they could do something 2 weeks from now and it probably wouldn't make that much of a difference. I don't know if he's attending whatever, is going on right now. I mean, they could suspend him, I suppose, until they do their own investigation or whatever. But yeah, I thought something might happen a little quicker, at least a suspension pending, further investigation of the facts and details of it. But it's a difficult situation. And, when you're dealing, as Butch said before, and as Missy Rocha-Faria said, when you're dealing with guns and especially loaded firearms that didn't even qualify under the law of the Massachusetts restrictions, I believe it's the 10, I'm not familiar with guns, but the 10 magazines, I guess, or 10 rounds supposed to be. So the guns weren't legal to begin with, whether they were in the airport or not. You're not supposed to have them to begin with. They weren't properly registered, as far as I know. I think they charged them when possession without an FID card. I certainly didn't have a license to carry either. So if you didn't have a license to carry, you didn't have an FID card, and he had, the magazine higher than what it's supposed to be, more rounds than you're supposed to have, he's already down 3 before he even gets to the airport. So, that's a little bit different than law-abiding citizen who has a gun license, who trained properly, who got the license, who's registered, has the right size rounds and all that. Now you can look at it and say, all right, well, wait a minute now, and how about the fact that they were loaded? Why in the earth would you have loaded weapons inside of a duffel bag, even in your house? They're not supposed to be loaded in your house either. They're supposed to be secured in a fashion that nobody could get a hold of them and do harm to themselves or anybody else. So I think Missy Rocha is right. It's horribly negligent at the very least before you even get to it.
Paul, as a person of the court, how do you go in there and plead not guilty?
Well, that's a thing too. A lot of times you see on television at the arraignment, they'll say he pleaded not guilty. Well, in order to enter into a plea agreement,
Yeah.
After you look at the facts and circumstances of the case,
Yeah.
the court's probably not even going to accept a guilty plea the first day you walk in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, a not guilty plea on day one is pretty much automatic. Even if you walked in and said, "Hey, I want to plead guilty to everything," well, you're going to walk in, plead guilty to everything, and take a 3-year sentence before you had a chance to look at it, before you had a chance to go through the details.
Yeah.
The court probably wouldn't even consider that as a reasonable thing to do. They probably wouldn't even accept it. So that's pretty much automatic. That's pretty much automatic. So then down the road, you can always change your plea. Right. If there was like mitigating circumstances, I'm not saying there are in this case or they're not. Well, let's say you're charged with X, and then upon further investigation, you say, well, yeah, the person committed X, but there's some mitigating factors. There's some factors that make it not as egregious. Then sometimes instead of getting this penalty, you get that penalty. Now the problem in this case is a mandatory sentence. So, you can't even go in front of the judge and say to the judge, well, instead of giving me 2 years, give me probation. Well, the judge can't give me probation. The only person that can do that is the prosecutor. Prosecutor can reduce the sentence, and go forward on a lesser charge, but the judge can't do that. So you as defendant have a choice, either go to trial or not go to trial. The mandatory sentence, there's not as much wiggle room as there is when there's not a mandatory sentence.
Well, listen, this ain't Santos on sports today. This is Santos on law today.
Yeah.
Everybody listening, I hope if you have some of these intentions, you write this down and call Paul and listen to what Paul's saying. And if you need
the first piece of advice, don't break the law in the first place. Then you don't have to call me. You don't have to call John Seed.
Stop breaking the law.
That's right. Don't break the law. Don't break the law. All right. So 774-762-6234. Give us a shout. We're talking about Marcus Smart being traded for Porzingis. Hey, what did you make of that whole thing where they tried to make the trade for Brogdon? The thing fell apart right before I went to bed. The whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
And then I woke up in the middle of the night. I fell asleep with the TV on. And all of a sudden, I think somebody texted me. It was either you or Ryan or somebody. And then I saw it on television like, wait a minute. This deal is going through. That was kind of strange how the whole thing went down.
Well, to what I've heard was that the Clippers were going for Brogdon. And then they went south on that trade because they didn't like the injury of what Brogdon had. And I think it's his left shoulder, if I'm not mistaken. So they decided that, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to look somewhere else. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
Right. And of course, the other side of the coin is now, okay, so now they trade Smart instead. We just talked about before how Smart always can stay on the court, whereas, Brogdon has this injury now. I mean, he was pretty good before about staying on the court, but now he has this injury. So now we got Porzingis, and last year he was on the court a lot. He had his best year. He's coming into his prime at 27, 28 years old. He can shoot that 3-ball. And they're saying, well, what do we want a 7'4" person to be able to shoot the 3-ball? Well, I was looking at the highlights. He shoots it right over everybody. It looks like a line drive. It looks like a line drive into the basket. Shoots it right over everybody. This guy is huge, but sometimes when somebody's that big, they don't have the same speed and mobility. So I don't know. He seemed a little clumsy when I used to watch him on Dallas, but hey, I think it creates something interesting because, like he's such a different kind of a player than Brown and Tatum. Brown and Tatum have all that like speed, athleticism, and all that. And now you got this guy here, like sort of like Time Lord, that big guy that you can do something maybe down in the paint. Now they say he's not that kind of player. He doesn't go down low that much, but it's interesting. Why wouldn't you use him like that? Why wouldn't you get this guy down into the short twos when you need him, and get him down for the alley-oop and stuff like that, and use him kind of like you use Time Lord? I mean, wouldn't that be the advisable way to use him?
That would be one, too. He can extend the floor by being out there. Now that draws, some of the big people out there, gives more room for a quick pass than a quick one-on-one, and you don't have to worry about one of the big guys down there. So let's say like he's out in 3 and Embiid has to come out past the foul line. So now that gives Embiid out there, and now a quick pass and Brown drives. Now Embiid has to really get back And so he's not there to create some kind of difference. So he can extend the floor, help them out in that way. And at the same time, hopefully use that size in the 7 feet range, get some rebounds. He averages 20 points a game and 8 rebounds a game in his career. So that's pretty impressive. And then maybe get like at least 3 or 4 assists a game. So he can pass as well. It's just a matter of, gelling with other good players, which hopefully will keep him on the floor longer than being the superstar and then getting banged around. And then you're not on the floor that often.
And I think his numbers last year were even better than the ones that you just gave because,
Yes.
That was the average over his career.
Yeah.
I think he was more in the mid to high 20s last year.
I think he was 23-9 or 23-10, if I was not mistaken.
So, let's say you're coaching the Celtics, right? I mean, how do you see Porzingis working with Brown and Tatum? Because, it's been Brown, Tatum, and Smart for so long that, we've had other people come in and leave. We had that point guard that came from where the heck did he come from? He came from Charlotte. He came and went, and it didn't work out, and he hurt his knee. And when Hayward was here, that didn't work out too well. And, of course, we had the whole Kyrie Irving situation, which no matter where he goes, it doesn't seem to work. There's been a lot of players that came through and out of here that were good players that didn't seem to work.
And does that open the door for Pritchard now, Paul? Because now he's got another year under his belt.
Right.
Who was a young player. Do you give him the true reins of being a point guard along with maybe White and kind of say, hey, this is his time now. We've seen enough from him to know that, let's give it to him. So let's see if that helps out or there's more moves to be made.
We'll talk about a guy that leaves it all on the floor. You certainly can say that about Pritchard. Nobody plays harder than this guy does. And I've always been a fan of Pritchard. The problem is defensively because he's small, right?
Yeah.
So if he's out there, is he a defensive liability? I mean, I think he is.
Could be. I mean, depends on the matchup of, what the other team has. It doesn't mean I got to give him 40 minutes a game. I can kind of move that in with Brogdon or White, something else to get some more guards involved. So it'll be interesting to see if Pritchard's minutes actually goes up, if he's more involved in this offense, or is Pritchard someone they're thinking about trading and Brogdon and Pritchard go, and then someone else comes in. So his name has been mentioned in some trade talks.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as the season wound down and we went into the offseason, I thought to myself, Pritchard, I think he even said, hey, I just assume be traded because, he was actually a player that they would use here and there. And then all of a sudden he became somebody that with all the depth that they had, they really couldn't use him. But now Smart's gone. What's going to happen with Brogdon. I mean, Brogdon, I can't see them keeping him now. So he leaves. Now you got Pritchard there. Yeah, there may be an avenue for Pritchard or they get somebody else, one or the other. But, I mentioned defense before. Well, Marcus Smart, 2 years ago, the defensive player of the year. Right. I don't think he had as good a year this last year, but there's a guy that can play defense when he wants to. What happens to the Celtics defense? I think that was a liability for them last year. They didn't play as good defense. In fact, you pointed it out that when Miami went to play Denver, all of a sudden, all these players that were scoring, 50% from three, they were guarding them so tightly they couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And you pointed out to me, that's how you play defense. That's what the Celtics should have done. So are they losing something on defense by losing Marcus Smart?
Absolutely. He's your defensive player of the year. And even last year, it may not have been his greatest year, but he's still somebody that on that side of the ball, you sit back and say, okay, how do I address this? Well, we need to be a better team defense, number one. And then number two, we're trying to put more points on the board via Porzingis. Then that will help our defense, down the road. And it gives us another big guy like Time Lord to help in blocks, rebounds, to boast up our defense too. So, they're losing it up front in the guard department. In that they might gain a little bit more down low. So they're trying to think of that piece of the puzzle as well. So let's see how they improve and what he can do when he's on the floor defensively.
All right. I did want to thank our sponsors. Let me throw the names in again here while we have a moment. John Seed, attorney at law, 156 8th Street in New Bedford, Lakeville Athletic Club, 325 Bedford Street in Lakeville, where you can play tennis and pickleball. Citywide Glass, 3 locations to serve you in Dartmouth, Fall River, and Taunton. and Scotty's Pub, 202 Pleasant Street in Fall River. Thank you for being a supporter of Santos on Sports. 774-762-6234. If you'd like to get in on the discussion, talking about Jack Jones and the Patriots, we're going to talk about them also in general, and getting rid of Marcus Smart, the trade with Porzingis. What do you guys think about that? Now, Chris, I want to ask you, while we're talking about the Patriots, we're talking about Jack Jones, but what about the Patriots in general? I'm looking at the offseason here. Doesn't feel like they've done a heck of a lot. There's a rumor out there about somebody that you're very familiar with, Ezekiel Elliott, who, if he puts on that Patriot uniform, he is going to go from bum to good player in about 2 seconds. We already know that. But interesting. I mean, the running game in the NFL isn't what it used to be. The running back isn't as important as the running back used to be. So whether they got him or not, that would be fine. I mean, a lot of experience, good player and everything else. But, the rest of the league, the rest of the AFC East, they've all done a lot. They've all added some significant, really good players. And it doesn't seem like the Patriots have kept up with them.
Well, Stevenson is their lead running back. And the thing on Ezekiel Elliott that we had saw, and I had sent it to you, was for 1 year for like $5 million. And it's basically to say, hey, it gives Stevenson maybe a break of the power running to not wear him down, let's say, and maybe get another guy in there that can be in between the tackles from the 20-yard line in that goal line, kind of offense or the red zone too. So might give you a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but I think would be the reason why they would actually attempt to get him. But, you saw, Paul, what's coming to camp, DeAndre Hopkins, a couple of big names there that have just seemed to come in, say hello, and turn around and get out. So, again, not the moves maybe New England Patriot fans would like to see. They're hoping that maybe a big name player can come in and help this team out, especially on the offensive side of the ball, probably especially at wide receiver, where, when I've talked to people around here, they think that's their weakest link right now on the offensive side, which is the wide receivers. They like what they see in Stevenson. There hasn't been that much controversy with Mac. They seem to continue to like him. They're building on that offensive line, but the receivers is where something they go, well, who are we going to throw the ball to? And either if someone needs to step up from what they have, or are they able to go out and get someone? And they haven't done it. So I think that's the biggest thing that most Patriot fans will look for during preseason and the start of the season, who they throw the ball to and what it looks like in the wide receiver department.
Yeah, and last year the favorite target of Mac Jones, they got rid of him. So yeah. It just doesn't feel like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a lot positive is happening over there. And yeah, you talk about Hopkins. Again, I went to bed one night, sounded like it was almost a done deal, and the next thing you know, it didn't happen. He got in the plane and flew away. That was it.
Yeah. So Juju is the name right now, and that's the only one. You have Hunter Henry still. And then obviously Stevenson in the back. So that's the three guys that you're really looking for. And then it's after that, who's going to step up? Who's going to be a third down back? Who's going to be another wide receiver? Who's going to be a deep threat? Who's going to be the blocking tight end? Maybe another catching tight end. There's a lot on that offensive side that has question marks, Paul. And I think that's what scares Patriot fans.
Yeah, we've talked many times, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but, obviously when you have Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time, so on and so forth, you have Rob Gronkowski, and some of those great defenses that we have, Wes Welker, great kickers over the years. Everything really kind of came together. It wasn't just Brady, that's for sure. But everything kind of came together. You had the weak AFC East. I mean, the sun, the moon, and the stars kind of lined up for everybody. But, I still say, if you're the greatest coach of all time, you still should be doing better than what we've seen when Tom Brady left. I'm not talking about Super Bowls. I know you're going to say, well, spoiled Patriots fan, you just expect them to be in the Super Bowl every other year. No, but I do expect them to not be in last place. So, like just watching some of these decisions, like getting N'Keal Harry, some of the other decisions that he's made over the last few years, some of the signings that they've made, some of the free agents that they just let go by. because it costs too much money. Well, hey, you got to spend a little bit of money here and there. I'm not saying you can buy the Super Bowl, but you got to be able to spend some money. The Rams did it. Some of these other teams have done it. They've looked at it and say, hey, Tyreek Hill, I mean, he just got in trouble too. So it's a bad example. But, really good players are coming and going, and you're not getting them. The team in the same division, they're getting them. So, I don't understand Belichick's approach. What is his thought process? Like, why is he not pursuing some of these free agents to mix in with some of the drafts that he has?
Yeah, and another thing he does is it's the Bill Belichick way, or the Bill Belichick system that he runs. And can this player fit my system? That's very big with Bill Belichick. And we've seen that a lot with some guys that he did bring in, and they don't seem to understand Bill's system. And they struggle, and then he lets them go. So maybe he's getting away from that and saying, I'm not even going to pursue this guy because I don't think he can handle our system or fit in or do what we need him to do. So that would be one, I think, of Bill's schemes, that talking with Bill O'Brien, talking with his defensive guys, talking with his special teams, all his other coaches, to say, hey, is this a perfect fit for what we need, where we're going, where we've been? How do you see this happening? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But right now, those moves don't seem to be favoring the Patriots as of late. They have in the past. They've gone out and got some great guys, and he's adjusted, he worked. But maybe again, Paul, age could be catching up. Maybe a little pride and ego catches up. So it's tough to say, but a lot going on there with Bill and the coaching staff, and maybe they'll find a way to put that product out this year with a new offensive coordinator. And right the ship.
Well, supposedly, word on the street is that Mac Jones is walking around with a little bit more pep in his step over there. He likes the fact that Bill O'Brien is over there now. He didn't like the offensive coordinators that they had last year. So he seems to be happy with Bill O'Brien. But a lot of people are saying, that wasn't even Bill's decision. That was more like Bob Kraft saying, hey, look, I don't want to get rid of Mac Jones. I know you don't like Mac Jones. Mac Jones and Bill Belichick kind of on the outs a little bit. And the rumor is that, Kraft said, hey, look, I'm not going to get rid of Mac Jones, so we got to figure it out. Maybe we'll bring Bill O'Brien back. And kind of Belichick went along with it, So let's say Bill O'Brien comes in and they kind of right the ship. That might not even be something that Belichick decided.
True, but, the other head coach, I can't see Kraft overstepping Bill and say, I'm going with this Bill. You're going to take him no matter what you think. I just see Bill and Bob chatting with one another and sitting down and saying, hey, this is the way we see it. And this is, this would be a good fit or not a good fit, or a player to get, or do we have the money for, or whatever. I just think it's been so good together with one another. Why would you go against it now after the success you've had and the organization has been so successful?
It might be a situation where, Kraft sat down with Bill, as you said, hey, we're thinking about bringing back Bill O'Brien. What do you think about that? And it might work better with the quarterback and blah, blah, blah. They kind of made a group decision. That's probably more likely that it happened in that fashion. But I do think that Bill was getting some pressure to bring in O'Brien because, that's the guy that the quarterback was going to work better with. Last year, it didn't work. Everybody agrees that it didn't work. So it seems to me that there was some pressure coming from up above.
Well, listen, it was going to change no matter what. It didn't have to be Bill O'Brien. It could have been anybody, but you knew that was going to be changed. And that was the number one priority, is to get the offense better. And it starts obviously with the coordinator. And so that's what they ended up doing. But it could have been anybody, whoever they were going to choose. But you knew that was going to be presented right from the beginning, whether it was Bob talking to Bill or Bill talking to Bob, or just working together and say, we have to start here and get better.
Well, it's too early right now, but when the season gets closer, we're going to get out the Patriots schedule, and we're going to go one by one right through the season and see where we come up. Now, between you, myself, Ryan, and Karen Garigian, by the way, we all came close. Karen Garigian ended up nailing it at 8 and 9. You and I were all within a couple of games of making that prediction. There were certain games you kind of figured, they'll win that one. There were games that you figure they're going to lose that one, and then there's the ones in the middle. But I gotta tell you, I'm looking at it, just kind of glancing at it, and they got one of the toughest schedules in the league. It's hard to imagine this team being over 500.
With the presence of the parity in the AFC East, now I have to agree with you because Miami's bumped up their game, Buffalo has bumped up their game, and now the Jets have offensively, obviously with Aaron Rodgers. So it makes it more of that kind of a division where it's not dominated by one team. It's going to be like a little black and blue division, and these guys are going to butt heads now every time they play. Home and away becomes very important. And so every game is going to be a battle between these teams. So that's nice to see for the league and the division. And yeah, I think it makes it much more difficult for New England to, be above 500. So I'm kind of seeing them just, glancing at it right now around that, an 8-10, 9-9, maybe just taking a look quickly. But, let's see how the preseason works out. Let's see what it looks like, how things get going. And then obviously we'll try to make our predictions when it comes to that.
All right. By the way, I don't know if I actually got the vote down here. The trade for Porzingis with Smart. Do you like it or you don't like it?
Me personally?
Yes.
Yeah, well, getting him and watching Smart go to Memphis, I'm liking it right now as long as I know that Porzingis gives me 65 games or more. If he's going to be a guy in his career 34 or 48 or 17, then no, and he's going to be injured prone, that's not going to help me. So I have to go by, what he does on the floor and how long he can do on the floor. But I think he will help this team.
All right. When you leave today, make sure you don't grab the wrong bag back there. Make sure there's a.
I'll make sure that I look through it first.
Yes, make sure you look there
before I go anywhere, and I have
not to make light of a serious situation, but no. I was just throwing some ideas out there to get people think, and it sounds like from what we've gathered, that they got a pretty strong case against Jack Jones. We'll have to see what the Patriots do about it. All right. Well, thank you very much for a fun time. We appreciate the calls and the comments, and we will talk to you again. For Chris Santos, I am Paul Santos for Santos on Sports. Have a fantastic evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.